Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/BrianEDenton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 228. Chapter 228. When Ermolov, having been sent by Kutuzov to inspect the position, told the field marshal that it was impossible to fight there before Moscow and that they must retreat, Kutuzov looked at him in silence. "Give me your hand," said he, and turning it over so as to feel the pulse, added, "You are not well, my dear fellow. Think of what you're saying." Kutuzov could not yet admit the possibility of retreating beyond Moscow without a battle. On the Poklony Hill, 4 miles from the Dorogomilov gate of Moscow, Kutuzov got out of his carriage and sat down on a bench by the roadside. A great crowd of generals gathered around him, and Count Raspachin, who had come out from Moscow, joined them. This brilliant company separated into several groups, who all discussed the advantages and disadvantages of the position, the state of the army, the plans suggested, the situation of Moscow, and military questions generally. Though they had not been summoned for the purpose, and though it was not so called, they all felt that this was really a council of war. The conversations all dwelt with public questions. If anyone gave or asked for personal news, it was done in a whisper, and they immediately reverted to general matters. No jokes or laughter or smiles even were seen among all these men. They evidently all made an effort to hold themselves at the height the situation demanded. And all these groups, while talking among themselves, tried to keep near the commander-in-chief, whose bench formed the center of the gathering, and to speak so that he might overhear them. The commander-in-chief listened to what was being said, and sometimes asked them to repeat their remarks, but did not himself take part in the conversations or express any opinion. After hearing what was being said by one or another of these groups, he generally turned away with an air of disappointment, as though they were not speaking of anything he wished to hear. Some discussed the position that had been chosen, criticizing not the position itself so much as the mental capacity of those who had chosen it. Others argued that a mistake had been made earlier, and that a battle should have been fought 2 days before. Others again spoke of the Battle of Salamanca, which was described by Croissart, a newly arrived Frenchman in a Spanish uniform. This Frenchman and one of the German princes serving with the Russian army were discussing the siege of Saragossa and considering the possibility of defending Moscow in a similar manner. Count Raspachin was telling a fourth group that he was prepared to die with the city train bands under the walls of the capital, but that he could still not help regretting having been left in ignorance of what was happening, and that had he known it sooner, things would have been different. A fifth group, displaying the profundity of their strategic perceptions, discussed the direction the troops would now have to take. A sixth group was talking absolute nonsense. Kutuzov's expression grew more and more preoccupied and gloomy. From all this talk, he saw only one thing, that to defend Moscow was a physical impossibility, in the full meaning of those words. That is to say, so utterly impossible that if any senseless commander were to give orders to fight, confusion would result, but the battle would still not take place. It would not take place because the commanders not merely all recognized the position to be impossible, but in their conversations were only discussing what would happen after its inevitable abandonment. How could the commanders lead their troops to a field of battle they considered impossible to hold? The lower grade officers and even the soldiers also considered the position impossible, and therefore could not go to fight, fully convinced as they were of defeat. If Bennigsen insisted on the position being defended and others still discussed it, The question was no longer important in itself, but only as a pretext for disputes and intrigue. This Kutuzov knew well. Bennigsen, who had chosen the position, warmly displayed his Russian patriotism. Kutuzov could not listen to this without wincing, by insisting that Moscow must be defended. His aim was as clear as daylight to Kutuzov. If the defense failed, to throw the blame on Kutuzov, who had brought the army as far as the Sparrow Hills without giving battle. If it succeeded, to claim the success as his own, or if battle were not given, to clear himself of the crime of abandoning Moscow. But this intrigue did not now occupy the old man's mind. One terrible question absorbed him, and to that question he heard no reply from anyone. The question for him now was, have I really allowed Napoleon to reach Moscow, and when did I do so? When was it decided? Can it have been yesterday when I ordered Platov to retreat? Or was it the evening before when I had a nap and told Bennigsen to issue orders? Or was it earlier still? When? When was this terrible affair decided? Moscow must be abandoned. The army must retreat, and the order to do so must be given. To give that terrible order seemed to him equivalent to resigning the command of the army. And not only did he love power, to which he was accustomed, the honors awarded to Prince Prozovsky, under whom he had served in Turkey, galled him, but he was convinced that he was destined to save Russia, and that was why, against the emperor's wish, and by the will of the people, he had been chosen commander-in-chief. He was convinced that he alone could maintain command of the army in these difficult circumstances, and that in all the world he alone could encounter the invincible Napoleon without fear, and he was horrified at the thought of the order he had to issue. But something had to be decided, and these conversations around him, which were assuming too free a character, must be stopped. He called the most important generals to him. "My head, be it good or bad, must depend on itself," said he, rising from the bench, and he rode to Fili, where his carriages were waiting. That concludes my reading of chapter 228 of War and Peace. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 228. Prepare to meet everything. Marcel Proust once wrote that to know a thing does not always enable us to prevent it. This is a lesson Kutuzov learns today, as it becomes known to him that there is no preventing Napoleon's march into Moscow. Kutuzov greets this news with initial disbelief. He's slowly persuaded, however, after he takes counsel from a group of generals on the subject. As the generals discuss the issue, Kutuzov grows more gloomy and preoccupied. He frets about the fate of Russia, as well as the fate of his command of the Russian army, a position he cherishes dearly. No individual is immune from the ensnaring web of fate. Life is going to life. Perhaps, however, Proust is only half right. Knowing a thing does not always allow us to prevent it, sure, but knowing a thing does allow us to prepare for it. Clarissa Harlow, a favorite of A Year of War and Peace, writes eloquently on the subject as she corresponds with her friend about how best to guard against the evil advances of the rake Robert Lovelace. Clarissa knows that Lovelace is up to something. She doesn't know what exactly. She decides that her best defense is an anticipatory offense. In a word, she writes, "Though hopeful of the best, I will always be fearful of the worst, and everything that admits of doubt. For it is better, in such a situation as mine, to apprehend without cause, than to subject myself to surprise for want of a forethought." This is wisdom we all, Kutuzov included, can draw from. Keep Napoleon from your house, but keep him always at your door. Daily meditation. Let the mind be prepared to meet everything. Let it know that it has reached the heights around which the thunder plays. Let it know that it has arrived where grief and avenging care have set their couch, and pallid sickness dwells in drear old age. With such messmates must you spend your days. Avoid them you cannot, but despise them you can, and you will despise them, if you often take thought and anticipate the future. Everyone approaches courageously a danger which he has prepared himself to meet long before, and withstands even hardships if he has previously practiced how to meet them. But, contrawise, the unprepared are panic-stricken even at the most trifling things. We must see to it that nothing shall come upon us unforeseen. And since all the more serious when they are unfamiliar, continual reflection will give you the power, no matter what the evil may be, not to play the unschooled boy. Seneca, Letter 107. That concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 228 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening with me today. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation to PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 229 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.